Hello, my name's Caroline Gray. I'm a lecturer in Spanish here at Aston University. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about what it's like to study modern languages at Aston. And I'm accompanied by my colleague, Dr. Brian Sudlow, who'll be monitoring the chat and will contribute at the end of the session. So why study languages today? We all know that lots of people speak English, that's what we hear so often, but actually only 6 to 7% of the population, of the global population, speaks English as their native tongue. And at least 75% of the world doesn't speak any English at all. And when you're learning a language, you're not just learning the words themselves, you're learning through that language how a different culture behaves, how different countries do things. And these are all hugely important parts of studying modern languages today. So when you study a languages degree, you'll not just be acquiring near-native fluency in another language, you'll also be acquiring an understanding of how other countries and cultures do things. And these are all skills that employers today look for. So if we think of intercultural understanding and what that means, a language is much more than just words. I'm a Spanish lecturer, so thinking of Spanish compared to English, one of the things I've always noted is that Spanish is a much more direct language than English. In English, we're very polite all the time, always saying please and thank you, could you do this, could you do that? Whereas Spanish can just say do it, and it's not rude, because that's just the way their language works. So thinking of an example, here in the UK, if you go into a coffee shop, you might say, please, could I have a coffee? And that, to us, that's our polite English. In Spanish, the equivalent is dame un café. You could go into a coffee shop in Spain and say dame un café. But that literally translated, that means give me a coffee. So you can imagine if a Spaniard came to the UK, didn't realise the cultural politeness of Britishness and went into a coffee shop and said, give me a coffee, that might come across as a bit rude to the waiter, who might be a bit angry. So this is a very basic example, but what I'm trying to show you is that through a language, we learn how another culture works, how other countries do things. And it's that broader intercultural understanding that's just as important as the words themselves. And I've given you a basic example of being in a coffee shop, but you can imagine in the world of work, the potential for misunderstandings, for making big mistakes, if you don't have that broader sense of global understanding of different cultures and ways of doing things that is essential to the modern working world. So these skills that we'll be teaching you at Aston through the in-depth study, both of the language itself and of the politics, society and cultures of the target countries where that language is spoken, are all skills that employers are looking for. If we look at this chart I've got on the screen here about what employers are looking for, you can see 64% of employers think international experience is important for recruitment. 64% of employers say graduates with an international background are given greater professional responsibility. And 92% of employers are looking for transversal skills such as curiosity, problem-solving skills, tolerance and confidence when recruiting. And these are all skills you're going to acquire through a languages degree. Some employers, as we've just seen, are looking for international knowledge and experience and the transferable skills it brings, such as problem-solving skills, the ability to understand different perspectives, and confidence. So why study modern languages at Aston? Why specifically Aston? We've started to look at why study languages, but what's unique about Aston? We help our students to really become career ready. Aston University puts a strong emphasis on employment and degrees that prepare you for the real world. And our languages graduates actually come 9th in the UK out of 62 universities for median salary level, measured 5 years after graduating. And that's because we do a lot to help our students become career ready. But of course, salaries are not everything. There are lots of valuable jobs that don't have high salaries. And whatever you want to do, we pride ourselves on helping you get ready for whatever career you choose. And Aston University is in fact first in the UK for added value. And by that I mean that if you compare our students' entry grades to their final degree result, that shows the quality of our teaching as our students make huge grounds whilst they're with us. And a large part of how we achieve that is by taking our teaching very seriously. We do both teaching and research, as most universities do, but whenever we are doing research as staff, I work on contemporary Spain, for example, we're thinking about how we can bring findings from that into the classroom to help you as our students. And modern languages at Aston are ranked 5th in the UK for satisfaction with teaching, in large part due to that. So here's a quote, for example, from one of our former students who studied the International Business and Modern Languages degree, saying, "What I will remember most fondly about my time at Aston University are the lecturers whose passion and encouragement made a heavy workload a lot easier to handle." So languages at Aston, what's it like? Well, we're actually quite different from other languages programmes elsewhere. We're part of a school of languages and social sciences that's closely linked to the Aston Business School, and our teaching and programmes reflect this. So what do I mean by that? Firstly, we have a very applied and professional focus. We aim to equip students with fundamental skills in intercultural understanding to help you in your future careers, whatever career you may choose. And a high percentage of our students choose to do a work placement on their year abroad. And that's something I'll talk about more shortly, because that's actually quite unusual. We're one of the few universities that offers a huge range of work placements to our students for their year abroad. And secondly, when I say our teaching and programmes reflect the links between languages, social sciences and business, that's because we focus on a broad-based understanding of the societies in which your chosen languages are spoken. So in contrast to other universities, a lot of which do a traditional languages and literature model, we explore a broader focus spanning the cultural, political, social and economic aspects of your target language countries. So you get a really applied and understanding of what's happening in the countries today where your target languages are spoken. And we focus on the practical application of language competence in real life and professional situations. So Aston is a pioneer in integrated language teaching. And what I mean by that is that when you're studying about what's happening in Spain, what's happening in Germany, what's happening in China, you'll be doing a lot of that in the target language. So, for example, in Spanish, if we're talking about the independence drive in Catalunya, vamos a discutir lo que está pasando en Catalunya, we'll be discussing a lot of that in Spanish. Or in French, you'll be doing it whatever is equivalent in French, etc., etc. And as I was mentioning before, our lecturers, when they're doing research on the target language, countries and cultures, they then think how to bring that into the classroom. So I work personally on contemporary Spanish politics and society, what's happening in Spain, and there's been a lot going on in Spain. It's quite a complex political scenario there. And I've been doing quite a lot of interviews in recent months on the media about that. So you might be coming into class in the morning on the train, via the bus, listening to the radio, and you might be listening to the radio and hear one of your tutors actually give an interview about what's happening in Germany, France, Spain. The picture I've put there is an interview I did on change of governments in Spain. And then the next minute, you'll be in the classroom discussing those dynamics in Spanish, in French, in German, with your tutors themselves. And beyond the target language cultures, I've talked a lot about what we do in terms of learning on the target countries. We also obviously think about where that fits within the global world more broadly. So you will have modules as well on broader global trends, such as the impact of technology on intercultural communication, that will help you to see where your target language cultures fit within the broader picture. So I've talked a bit about our degree programmes. What exactly can you study with us then? What combinations are available for your undergraduate degree programmes? Well, we have half-degree programmes on the languages side in French, German, Spanish and Mandarin Chinese. And since that's a half degree program, it means you can combine it with another half. So you can either combine with another language, another one of those languages, or with another subject. And the subjects available include international business, international relations, sociology, and English. And languages can be taken either post A-level or from beginner's level. So if you've got an A-level in French, you can continue with your French, and then you can either pick another subject, such as international relations, to go with it, or you might want to start another language from scratch, such as Spanish. But all our languages are also available from beginner's level, which is called the ab initio route. And that route is also suitable for those who have a language to GCSE. So if, for example, you had the opportunity to study German to GCSE, but your school didn't offer the A-level, you would like to be able to keep it going and pick it up again, then why not take our ab initio route for German? So there's lots of combinations available to you. And some of the subjects you can study languages in conjunction with, such as international business, international relations, sociology, maybe subjects you didn't have a chance to study at school because most of them aren't on offer at school level. But they're subjects that go really well with languages. Think about international relations, which we offer with all of our languages, French, German, Spanish, and Mandarin Chinese. International relations involves the study of how different countries relate to one another within the global world, how they cooperate on certain initiatives, but also where the conflicts are between different countries and different continents and why. So you can see how understanding the global order via an international relations side of your degree fits very well with studying a language and the kinds of things you'll be doing on your target language cultures within the language half. So there's lots of combinations available to you. And one thing I would say is if you're particularly interested in the international business and modern languages combination, there's a talk specifically on that today at 1 p.m. So I'd recommend you listen to that talk as well. And it'll also be recorded on the website later if you don't manage to see it at that particular time. So what exact combinations have we got available for languages degrees? Well, firstly, there are dual language combinations. So if you want to study European languages, you can study 2 out of French, German, and Spanish, as long as at least one of them is post A-level. You must have at least one of them to A-level already. And then the second language can either be studied post A-level if you've done both to A-level, or you can study it from beginners on our ab initio route. In terms of single language combinations, you can pick French, German, Spanish, or Mandarin Chinese. And for the European languages, you can either study them post A-level or from beginners. Mandarin Chinese is available from beginners only. And you can combine those languages with another subject. And I've put on the screen there the different combinations available for your particular language for 2021 entry. So, for example, French can be studied with international relations or English language or English literature or international business. So have a think about what combinations you're particularly interested in studying. So what experience can you expect with us? What will your degree programme be like? Well, there's a clear progression through your degree with 2 different progression routes. So if you've got an A-level in the language, from first year in that language, on the language half of your degree, your time will be split between language skills modules focused on developing your fluency in the language, and then content modules where you'll be studying the contemporary politics, culture, and society of your target language countries. If you're taking the beginner's route, where you're studying a language from scratch, or you've got a GCSE in the language, then for your first 2 years, you'll have particularly intensive language training on the language side to help you get up to the same level as the A-level students by the time you return from your placement year and enter final year. So there are 2 different progression routes, but whichever of those routes you take from your first year, you'll have throughout your degree programme a core set of modules focused on developing your skills and employability. And these will include, for both routes, both post A-level and beginners routes, core language skills modules for your level, Core content modules on the contemporary culture, politics and society of your target language cultures. A range of optional modules on topics of global relevance, such as the impact of technology on intercultural communication. And by final year, you'll have the choice to focus on what most interests you. And we have novel teaching and learning approaches and a variety of assessment methods designed to enhance your employability. So yes, you'll have essays and exams to do, but we also have much more innovative assessment methods in addition to those. So for example, you could be in a classroom thinking about in a language skills module, and one of the tasks could be that you've got to think about a product that's particularly popular in the British market, how you might market that to a French audience. And you might need to design a marketing campaign to market that product that has taken off in the UK but not in France, to target a French audience. And so you'd be using your language skills, thinking about how you'd market this product to a French audience, but you'd also be thinking about the broader cultural knowledge you're acquiring. You know, we have different sense of humours in the UK compared to France. Why is it that something that works as a joke in English on an advert doesn't work in France? Or you might need to think about what is it that might appeal to a French audience depending on their culture, so as to market that product better. So you'll be doing all sorts of activities in your classes that are actually directly related to the kinds of activities you might do later on in the world of work, and therefore you'll be prepared once you get to the end of your degree to be able to talk about all these things you've done when you go for interviews. So examples of the kind of modules we have, I've put some examples there: Introduction to the French, German and Spanish speaking countries, or Introduction to China if you're doing Chinese. That's a core module for first years. Other modules like Politics and Society, Language and Society in the French speaking world. If you're interested in the business side, particularly if you're doing a combination with business, you might want to do, well, you will be doing if you're doing a combination with business, the modules on things like international business and markets in your target cultures. And then there are broader modules like working in the language industries and technology and intercultural communication that cover cross-country trends. And there's flexibility throughout the degree programme to choose what best suits you. So, for example, you might decide during your first year that actually you're thinking you'd quite like to be a translator. Well, if you decide that, then in your second and final year, you can pick our 3 translation-related modules and end up graduating with a minor in translation. So what does that mean in practice? This route's available to all those who have a language post-A level. It means that if you pick in your second year our translation-related modules, which include technology and intercultural communication, practical translation, working in the language industries, you'd be able to graduate with a minor in translation at the end. So what that means is you would have the BSc, say in French and German that you started, but with a minor in translation as well. But this is, as I say, is optional. If you're not interested in being a translator, no worries. You don't need to pick these modules. You can pick other ones instead that are on things that appeal to you more. Another option of flexibility, you can learn an additional language for fun for free in your first year as an extracurricular subject. And we have this available in Arabic, French, German, Mandarin, Chinese, and Spanish. And if you enjoy learning that language, then you can actually, for some of the degree programs, choose to keep it going as a minor subject in your second and final years. So that's available, again, to those studying their main language post-A level. If you want to pick up another language as a minor, you can do that. If you try it out in first year as an extracurricular subject, see you like it, you can then keep it going in your second and final years. Another aspect of our degree programme that's really important is the placement year. And this really is a year of discovery and adventure when you'll get to experience firsthand the different target cultures in those very countries. And you'll be prepared for this because in first and second year, we'll have been talking to you all the time in classes in French, German, Spanish, Chinese. So you have 3 options on your placement year in many possible countries. You can either do a work placement with a company or organisation, a study placement at one of our partner universities, or an English language teaching assistantship with the British Council. And what's unique about Aston actually is this work placement option, and that's actually what most of our students choose. Most universities offer the option of a study placement or an English language teaching assistantship. We offer those options, but we also offer a huge range of work placements with companies and organisations that we've developed relationships with over the years in a whole range of countries. So we have a placements team who actively sources placements all the time in different countries across the globe, so that you can pick work placements to try out different areas of work during your year abroad. And actually you can try 2 if you want. If you're doing 2 languages, you will definitely do 2. But if you're doing 1 language, you can also try 2 different placements. So if you're not sure what you want to do when you leave university, perhaps you're thinking, I'd quite like to try a sales role. Try out a sales placement. Or if you're thinking, I'd like to get involved in charity activities, working for the third sector, well, you can try that out during your year abroad. Do tailor your placement year to what you would like to experience and what you would like to try out in different countries. So, for example, if you're studying Spanish and German, you could do a placement in any of the Spanish-speaking countries first, and then any of the German-speaking countries. And this really helps prepare our graduates for a whole range of exciting graduate destinations when they finish their degrees. I've put there the titles of some of the different organisations that our recent graduates have gone to work for, the kinds of job titles they have. And one of the things that our graduates often say to us is that the placement year really helped prepare them for that. And for example, one of our recent grads that I've put there, Daisy Hamilton, who studied for an international relations and Spanish degree with us, she said, I chose to study at Aston because unlike many other universities, I was offered the opportunity and the contacts for me to work during my year abroad, rather than just study or teach English. I knew that having work experience is vital for graduates now, and this was one of the few universities offering that. So we take a huge, we take real pride in offering real opportunities to our students to get different work placement opportunities during the year abroad. And also, as I was saying before, we incorporate activities within the classroom that will be directly related to what you might do in the world of work. So, you might be producing a country risk analysis, assessing the political environment in a country and how that might affect doing business in that country. Or you might be planning a marketing project to market a product to a French or German-speaking audience, as I explained earlier. These are the kinds of activities we do in the classroom. So I would now like to give you a bit of a taster, a bit more of a taster of what we do in the classroom. So I'm going to give you now a content taster of something you might do, the kinds of activities you might do in your first year when studying the core introduction to the French, German, Spanish-speaking countries, depending on your language, or introduction to China if you're doing Chinese. So since I teach in the Spanish section, I'll give the example of what we do in the module on Introduction to Spain and Latin America. So this module aims to give students a sound knowledge of Spanish and Latin American culture, politics, the economy and society, as well as an understanding of the principal events and processes that have shaped the modern Hispanic world. And it provides a core basis for other modules in subsequent years. And you'll see I've indicated there that we cover a broad base including culture, politics, the economy and society. And we do that so that you can start to see what you're most interested in and what you might like to focus most on in your second and final years. So, examples of the kinds of activities we might do. Well, to show you that, I'd like to start by thinking about what events in Spain have hit the news here in the UK over the past year. Some of you may have heard about what's been going on in Catalonia, a region in the north east of Spain, where there have been growing demands for independence from the rest of Spain. Another thing that's hit the news in the UK in the past year in relation to Spain is the fact that the former dictator Francisco Franco, who died in 1975, was exhumed, his remains were exhumed from the prominent spot where they'd been buried just outside Madrid last year, and they were moved elsewhere. So why is it that a dictator that died in 75 and was buried then, why is it that decades later his remains are being exhumed and moved elsewhere? Well, there'd been a huge debate going on because Spain's transition to democracy involved letting the past be past, letting bygones be bygones, not punishing anyone who had been involved in committing crimes during the dictatorship. And the dictator himself then ended up being buried in quite a prominent spot just outside Madrid. And it had almost become like a shrine to the dictator. And obviously a lot of people felt this was very pragmatic. You couldn't imagine having something that was like a shrine to Hitler in Germany. So how was that being allowed in Spain? So there was a whole debate about this, and his remains were exhumed last year from that prominent burial spot. Another thing that's hit the news, Spaniards have had a lot of elections recently. Between 2015 and 2019, they had 4 elections, 2 of which were last year. So why is it that Spain has had all this political turmoil? So I'm pointing out some key things that have happened in Spain in the past year that have hit the news in the UK. But what would we actually be doing in the Introduction to Spain part of the module? Well, we'd be starting to understand some of the origins of these processes, starting to understand how Spain works culturally and politically, what are the historical origins of some of those Spain-specific features, so that you can begin to understand what's happening in Spain today and where that's come from. You know, what form did Spain's transition to democracy to take? And why is it then that these debates, even now, are still going on about what form that took? And we would be learning about these issues through interactive classes and seminars. And we do a whole range of activities in those. So obviously at university, you're going to need to read books. That's essential, but we do a lot more than just reading books. We also do things like watching documentaries and discussing the different perspectives in them. So an award-winning documentary, for example, that I've enjoyed discussing with my students is The Silence of Others. It's a documentary in Spanish, El Silencio de Otros, with subtitles in English, which is about people's experiences of the Franco dictatorship and how they dealt with the fact that during the transition to democracy, there was an agreement between the left and the right to allow the past to be past and to bygones to be bygones. And that was deemed necessary at the time to allow Spain to transition to democracy. But it did cause a lot of problems for people whose families had suffered during the dictatorship, and they felt they didn't receive justice for those crimes that they had suffered. So this documentary talks about people's experiences of all that. And what we would do is we would watch the documentary and then we'd discuss it in class. And we'd discuss it in Spanish so that you're practicing your language skills as well as learning about what's been happening in Spain. And we might also read newspaper articles. Spain's newspapers have reflected the exhumation of Franco's remains very differently. And that's because they reflect different political perspectives. So your left-wing press, in general in Spain, has praised Spain's socialist government for doing this, saying Spanish democracy has now become more dignified. The dictator has been removed from his prominent burial spot. But right-wing newspapers, a lot of them said, look, this is a political tactic by the left-wing government, which was for electoral reasons primarily, and so they criticised the government. So what we'd be looking at in class is how have different newspapers with different political perspectives reflected what's happened in different ways. And we discussed that. You know, how is language used to create different perspectives? And you can see how that can be useful for a lot of different contexts. I mean, I talked to you before about how, you know, maybe in the future you might want to work in a marketing job, thinking about how to market different products to different audiences. Well, you'll need to think about how to use language in different ways to capture different audiences. So you can see how, if we're looking at newspaper articles, learning how language is used in different ways to create different perspectives, to reflect different perspectives, that has really transferable skills to a whole wide range of jobs that you might do in the future. And so everything we're doing is focused on those overarching aims I talked about earlier in terms of developing your language skills, developing your ability to see and analyse different perspectives in a global world, developing skills in critical analysis and problem solving. And these are all skills that employers value along with international experience, as we saw before. And these are skills that you will acquire with us. So I've talked to you now about our language programs in general and given you a taster about what you might do in a target language module in your first year. For those of you on the post-A level route, those of you on the ab initio route would take that module in your second year once you've got a stronger base in the language. And I want to hand over now to my colleague Brian, who's going to talk to you about another kind of module that you'll have the chance to study at Aston on our languages programs. And that's a module on broader global trends so that you can see where your target cultures fit within wider global dynamics that are important to the world today. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Brian for him to talk to you about a different activity.
Hello, my name is Brian Sudlow, and in this second part of the Languages Talk for Open Day, I want to talk to you about a new kind of module that we have coming online for our programs from 2021 onwards. Many of the modules we have already are focused on particular national contexts, France, Germany, Spanish-speaking countries, etc. But this new kind of module has a much more international and global focus. And the name of the module that I wanted to tell you about was Changing Worlds, Changing Workers, Global Evolutions in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. So what will students learn about in this kind of module, or this module in particular? Well, the aim of the module is to help students analyse the contemporary evolution of technology and to evaluate its impact on the nature of employment across the globe. Because we're living in a fast changing world, and particularly at the moment, some observers call it the fourth industrial revolution, the kind of techno revolution that's happening all around us because of artificial intelligence, robotization, automation, and all the technological processes that we're so aware of. And of course, this situation poses new questions for students who are just beginning their degrees, because our students will be preparing for a world that may look very different, even just 5 years ahead. So how are students going to be able to operate in that world? Well, as I say, this module will focus in particular on the kind of skills that students need to acquire. And we'll look at emerging skill maps that the experts are trying to develop at the moment to show what will be the sorts of skills needed in the future, the skills that will enable us as humans to continue to be employable, even in a context where there are more and more machines, computers, software, hardware, and so on that can do tasks that currently we need people to do. There's a lot of publications, a lot of books coming out on this very topic at the moment. Daniel Susskind, A World Without Work, Joseph Aoun, Robot Proof, Jeff Wald, The End of Jobs. And these are all thinkers who are engaging with this dilemma, which is happening now and which concerns most your generation, the generation of students who are going to begin their degrees in the next few years. So what kind of things would we do in this module, you know, apart from learning about the context and the skills? Well, we try to think in evaluative ways about how to race with the machines, or how to race against the machines, if you like. The sorts of authors that I just mentioned have been drawing up lists of skills that the employees of the future need to think about. And these skills divide into different categories. In the category of sociability, for example, we think that things like human literacy, cultural agility, the ability to operate between different cultures, interpersonal, intercultural relations, how to understand why different cultural groups do things in different ways, and emotional intelligence, the ability to spot, to pick up on emotional moods undercurrents and things like this. These are the kind of sociability skills that many think will be increasingly important, because they're very, very difficult to recreate through using simply artificial intelligence. Cognitive skills too, skills like creativity and critical thinking, these have always been valued, but also increasingly experts talk about cross-systems thinking, thinking outside the box. Cross-systems thinking is, if you like, a way of being able to move between the different perspectives that disciplines bring to a problem. So how might accountants and money men, if you like, look at the issue of education as compared to how educationalists and pedagogues think about education? And a cross-systems thinker is someone who might be able to move between these two different worlds in order to move education forward. Tool skills as well are another set of skills that are going to be increasingly important. Technological literacy, by which I don't mean just operating in Microsoft Office, but I'm talking about real technological literacy, coding, how to understand coding, the basic language of computers and so on. And data literacy, the ability to handle and process large packets of data that are increasingly important for all kinds of businesses and all kinds of professional contexts. So in this module, for example, we might think about questions like this. Which skills do you consider linguists best excel at, and why? I would ask a question like that in order to try and help the language students become more aware of how they can use their language and intercultural understanding to face the new kinds of problems that we'll have in a more automated world. And indeed, which do you consider, the second question here, which do you consider the most valuable skills in each column? Because of course we can't be equally gifted or able with all the different skills. We've got to find things that interest us and things that will still be valuable to future employers, but things also which we feel like we have a taste for, an ability for. So in this kind of module, we're thinking transnationally, we're thinking globally, we're thinking between the different contexts, our own national context here in Britain, but also the European context, the context of the wider world, and so on. And we're trying to see, we're trying to understand some of the changes that are happening, which will affect us now, and which are certainly going to affect your generation in the future. Just to sum up then what this Open Day Talk for Languages has been about. Language degrees at Aston have a very particular character. We mark ourselves out from other universities who take a more traditional approach, doing literature and history and these sorts of things, although we do some history. But we focus more on the professional skills, on the application of language and cultural understanding to the modern world, to the modern and contemporary situation. So our degrees are about learning, especially through the target language, to communicate in real world situations. They're also about understanding the target cultures, but from a modern and contemporary angle, to see the kind of things that are important for those cultures today. We try to teach our students to apply this knowledge to new scenarios, so that they are preparing not just for the assessment in the module, but also then for life after graduation. We invite students to acquire the key skills that are going to make them employable and going to make them desirable employees in businesses. And we also want to help our students develop a kind of portfolio of knowledge and skills that's relevant not just to one career path, but to many different career paths. So just to sum it all up then, what we try to deliver at Aston is all the knowledge and skills that are needed by a well-rounded and competent graduate who needs to think and operate in what is, in fact, a fast-changing world. So, good luck with your search for the right university, and I wish you all the best for the future.